Hello students, now we will be discussing the theories of development. The first one is modernization theory. According to Alvin So, there are certain conditions to introduce the theory of modernization after the Second World War. After the Second World War, the Soviet nations have split into pieces and it has lost its power. At the same time, United States of America has got its superpower. And some of the nations which are there in the European continent like Great Britain, France, Germany also has lost its power. And some of the nations like China, Korea have spread the communalism in their countries. At the same time, some of the third world countries have attained independence. So at the time, this modernization has been spread across the world. So for that reason, modernization perspective or theory has been important. Modernization is an inevitable process and it is also a lengthy process. So we are going to introduce the technology across the world and people are going to adopt to the modern values, modern techniques and so on. So when the subordinate nations are going to adopt to these situations or to the dominant nations, it may lead to homogeneity of societies, which is going to lead to convergence. So this modernization, we can call it as a transformative process. They have viewed as nations which have got enough economical prosperity and stability in terms of democracy. And this modernization is an irreversible one. According to Rostow model, there are 5 stages of development in the society. If you see, the first one is traditional society, where people used to much depend on the animal power. They used to be very close to the nature, my dear friends. Because of certain factors like famines, droughts, wars and so on, people were forced to increase the production. So at that time, at this stage, we call it as a precondition for takeoff. And later on, they have introduced the modern values, technology, everything, which has increased the production part. We call it as takeoff process. And once the industrialization has taken place, it has driven to maturity. And once there is a lot of production, it led to the decrease of the price of the commodity, which allowed for mass consumption within the society. So there are 5 stages in terms of development in the societies, my dear friends. Now let us discuss about dependency theory. This theory has laid its foundations in the year 1950. This theory gives more importance to fiscal policy rather than monetary policies. There are 2 major hypotheses for this dependency theory. They think that there are 2 nations, or the nations have been classified into 2 types. One is core nations and the other one is peripheral nations. According to A.G. Frank, the peripheral nations like Latin America in comparison to core nations like United States of America have high industrialization in Brazil and so on. So when core nations are going to recover from their problems and begin integrating with the peripheral nations are going to set back. That means the core nations are going to design the policies for the interest of their own nations, and they are going to see the peripheral nations to support the core nations in terms of providing the raw material for those nations. So obviously what happens, they are going to depend on the core nations for doing the economical aspects. But here we have to see that the core nations are much benefited than the peripheral nations. So those nations which are very close, which have close relation with the core nations are either feudal societies or else traditional societies, my dear friends, who can provide the raw material to the core nations. In this theory, there is one more theory. We call it as world system theory. According to this, a new capitalism, a new form of capitalism gave birth to this theory. Third world countries aiming at rising the standard of living and betterment of social conditions have introduced this. So according to the world system theory, we have high economic growth, especially in East Asia, and there are wars in Vietnam and so on. So this gave birth to the world system theory. Wallerstein is one of the sociologists prominent sociologist whom we need to understand here. He has introduced the theory of underdevelopment. In his theory, he talked about three concepts: core nations, semi-periphery nations, and periphery nations. The core nations are very, very powerful, and they are going to make the policies for the betterment of their own societies by exploiting the peripheral nations. But some of the peripheral nations, because of multiple factors, there can be multiple factors, they may compete and they may also enhance their positions. Whereas some of the core nations, because of certain factors, they may lose their power and they may also come down. They may become semi-periphery nations or else periphery nations, my dear friends. There are multiple factors. It may be the factors like population. Right now, India is known for its population, young population, intellectual population, which is one of the reasons for the boosting of economical condition in the country. And the entire world is looking towards India. They want to have cordial relations. So obviously we can see that the position of India is increasing like anything, whereas there are certain countries which are losing their power. According to Wallerstein, some small countries, newer global communication systems, military relations and transference of knowledge have huge impact which is going to influence. Right now the government of India is talking about transferring the technology. We are talking about having BRICS, having more members into that so that we can have a global communication system where we can also share the military personnel so that we can provide security for these nations and so on. So all these are going to contribute for the development of this society. Now let us discuss about globalization theory. It is basically global mechanism of economic transactions. Scholars have emphasized on culture, on cultural links with political, economical and financial aspects. Now let us discuss about the main features of globalization. Here we are going to have interactions not only among the people who are residing in different nations, but also it develops the interaction with multiple nations across the world, my dear friends. It also helps in terms of communication between the developing nations as well as developed nations in terms of communicating technological innovations. We have purchased S-400 system from Russia. We are purchasing a lot of ammunition and technology from various countries across the globe. Economical transactions are also becoming more and more virtual right now. Majority of the decisions in the developing nations are made either by the elite people or the business classes who are residing in that respective country or people across the globe, my dear friends. Economic and social structures in a country may be determined by the cultural elements. Now let us discuss the three principal points which can help explain the theory of globalization. The first one is the cultural factors, second one is global communication, and the third one is standardization in technological advances.